It has been 5 years since the first positive test of COVID-19 was detected in Maine. Even in a state full of resilient people, the pandemic took its toll.
As of late March, more than 3,500 people have died from the virus. These are just two of the names behind the numbers. Destiny Herrmann and her husband Eddie were married June 14th, 2014.
He was an amazing guy, very hard worker, a provider.
The two had a little boy together and another baby on the way when their love story came to a jolting end.
It was very hard explaining that, Daddy wasn't coming home.
Eddie was diagnosed with COVID in April of 2021. His symptoms quickly went from bad to worse. He was 40 years old. At the time, Destiny was 7 months pregnant and had been in the hospital the night before he passed.
He had run a fever of about 103, 104. I had come home from the hospital and he had purple fingers and toes.
Destiny says her neighbor called 911, but it was too late.
They thought at first he had just passed out, but he had flatlined. They worked as long as they could. Ultimately, his heart and his body was too weak from fighting the virus.
A few months prior, that same deadly virus crept into the lives of the Corliss sisters. Their mother, Rochelle, who was 71, contracted the virus at her assisted living facility in Saco.
Anybody that knew her knew how special she was.
The word I always think of is sunshine. And what sunshine does, it kind of warms you from the inside out. That was my mom.
When Rochelle fell ill in January of 2021, her daughters, Becky and Shannon, quickly realized their mom would not be leaving the hospital.
And we had to choose between the two of us with who was going to get to go in. And this is where I get emotional because she didn't let me do it. But then at the same time, I think it was like, I'm the oldest. And my mom was like, you're the oldest. You need to go do that. So I had to do it for my mom. I had to do it for her. And I appreciate that she allowed me that moment. And so they suited me up head to toe. I saw one person until they walked me to the COVID ICU. My mom loved Queen. They had a cell phone in a bag, like next to her head on her pillow. And I'm not kidding you. I walked in to Radio Gaga like I was at Wembley Arena back in 1990 with Freddie Mercury. And I was like, so in such a dark moment, I was like, you know what? Mom is going out the way she would want to go out.
When she was ready, Becky drove back home and with her sister and their partners, said their final goodbyes through an iPad.
They took her off the ventilator, and that nurse, I think her name was Laura, couldn't have been a nurse more than a couple years, sat with my mother and held her hand and just was keeping an eye on the monitors and kind of said, looked at us and said, it's time. And that was it. And she passed on a Zoom call. And we are not the only family that had to say goodbye to their loved one.
No one should have to say goodbye like that.
That pain of not being able to say goodbye is something Destiny understands.
I was not allowed to go into the hospital to see my late husband after his passing because of COVID precautions. So I didn't really get to say that goodbye. And by the time I was allowed out of quarantine, my late husband had already been cremated.
Navigating the grief that has come with losing a loved one during a pandemic has not been easy, but both families say they are finding ways to honor them while they move forward.
The community really stepped up after his passing. I'm very grateful for them. I have found that you can do counseling, you can meet with a psychiatrist, but your people are going to be the other widows and widowers that have lost their spouses.
The part about my mom telling us to just go on and be happy is what gives you the peace.
There's a hole to lose someone to something that was also very polarizing. and everybody had differing opinions on everything, and it's not to go down that road, but to take a step back and also know that there was loss in here. Every number has a name.
This is just one of the stories that will be featured in News Center Maine's COVID anniversary special. You can watch it on our News Center Maine Plus app. It's available to download on Amazon Fire, Roku TV, and Apple TV.